Let's start right here with this incredibly powerful idea. The idea that for many, Jewish identity in the West isn't just a culture or a religion. It's tied up in this deep personal way with a collective memory of trauma. A wound that isn't just something in a history book, but it's felt, personally, whether you were there or not. It becomes this inheritance, something that shapes a whole consciousness. So in this explainer, we are going to unpack that very concept, what we're calling the invisible wound. We're going to trace how this idea of Jewishness was, for centuries, constructed as the other in Western thought. And, this is the really crucial part, how Jewish artists and writers, especially in the modernist era, responded. They didn't just walk away, they grabbed the very tools of the culture that excluded them and forged something radically new. So here's our roadmap. First, we're going to define what we mean by the invisible wound. Then we'll dig into its origins, way back in Western thought. We'll see how that idea festered and turned into this major cultural anxiety during modernism. Then the turning point, the birth of a new kind of Jewish poetry. And finally, we'll connect all of this to a universal idea, the power of giving a wound a language.
All right, first things first. Let's get a really clear handle on this central idea. What exactly are we talking about when we say the invisible wound? Okay, so here's the key. The invisible wound isn't just about bad things that happened in the past. It's about how that history of persecution, of constantly being defined as the other, gets woven right into the fabric of identity itself. It becomes a kind of psychological inheritance, a way of seeing the world that's passed down through generations.
And it's so important to get this. We're not talking about some single monolithic identity. As the scholar Jonathan Friedman puts it so well, Jewishness is an endless dispute. It's a living, breathing, often argumentative space where a collective identity is always being forged, broken, and then remade. That constant motion, that turbulence, is actually part of its core nature. So, where did this wound even come from? To really get it, you have to go way back to the foundations of Western philosophy and theology, where Judaism was set up as a kind of dark mirror, something the West could define itself against. The term anti-Judaism here is really specific. It's about more than just prejudice. It's about the use of the Jew as a rhetorical tool, as a category to draw a line in the sand. It's a way of saying we know who we are because we know we are not that. Jewishness becomes the necessary negative reflection in that dark mirror. And wow, you can see how early this started. Just look at Pauline theology. You have this series of powerful, clean binaries set up to create distance between the new Christian faith and its Jewish origins. And you see the pattern, right? Judaism is consistently aligned with the literal, the stone, the slave, the physical body, while Christianity claims the spirit, the heart, freedom, and the transcendent. It's an incredibly powerful setup. And please don't think of this as some dusty, forgotten idea. As the historian David Nierenberg points out, this wasn't just a side issue. It was one of the basic tools used to build the entire structure of Western thought. It was baked into the blueprint from day one. Okay, so let's fast forward. How did these ancient ways of thinking show up later on? Well, as we hit the late 19th and early 20th centuries, they kind of metastasized. They morphed into this widespread cultural anxiety, a kind of ghost that haunted the entire modernist movement. And it gets a name, the fantasy of Judaization. All those old binaries we just saw, they get mapped onto new, modern fears. Jewishness becomes a catch-all symbol for everything modernists worried was ruining culture. Things like crass materialism, a sense of rootlessness, abstract finance, and even a language they saw as somehow inauthentic or parasitic. And you can literally hear this anxiety in the voices of modernism's most famous figures. Take Richard Wagner. He attacks what he calls Jewish expression on a purely gut aesthetic level. It's not just different. To him, it's a jumbled blabber, something fundamentally ugly and non-artistic. Or look at Henry James, watching Jewish immigrants on the Lower East Side. He sees this resilient but totally alien presence, a foreign body that he fears is going to overwhelm and displace what he considers the true English language. For a poet like Ezra Pound, the corruption was everywhere, in economics and in language. He became obsessed with usury, which for him was completely tied to Jewishness, and he saw it as a cancer that rots money and words from the inside out, making them meaningless. And then there's T.S. Eliot, who, in poems like Gerontion, paints this picture of the Jew as this squatting, unsettling figure in a decayed house, a living symbol of spiritual and cultural rot.
Seeing these voices one after another, you realize just how deep this fantasy ran through the high culture of the time.
So, faced with all of this wall of cultural antagonism, a language that seems designed to cast you out, what do you do? How do you even make art? Well, this question brings us to a huge turning point, the creation of a new Jewish poetics. I mean, really think about that problem for a second. It's profound. If the very words you have to use, the artistic traditions you inherit, are all loaded with ideas that see you as a corrupting force, where do you start? Do you throw it all away and start from scratch? Or is there another way? And this is where the poet Louis Zukofsky gives us such a brilliant answer. Instead of trying to escape his outsider status, he leans into it. He reclaims his marginal position. He doesn't invent a new language, no. He dives straight into the English canon, into modernist forms, but he injects them with Jewish history, with Talmudic ways of thinking, with a radical focus on the physical reality of words, words, words. He turns his own fragmented identity into the very engine of his art. Just feel the sheer audacity in this passage. He's declaring, I'm going to read their great poet, John Donne, as if he belongs to me. He's going to inhabit their world, leopard in their spots, and then, from the inside, he's going to turn it all upside down. It's this incredible project of assimilation not as surrender, but as a hostile takeover. Okay, so for our final thought, let's just pull the lens way back. Because this whole artistic project of giving a collective historical wound a voice, it actually has these deep, fascinating parallels with a much more universal human process. How we deal with trauma, period.
Think about this concept from shamanic traditions. You have some kind of affliction, a spirit that first just shows up as physical symptoms, as chaos in the body. The shaman's job isn't to just make it go away, it's to help the person translate that chaos into words, into a story, and then to externalize it, to put it into an object. The unspeakable becomes spoken, the internal becomes external. Now, that might sound ancient or abstract, but look at this, a raw, totally modern example from a therapist's office. The wound here isn't historical, it's this incredibly personal silence between a father and son. But the mechanism of healing is identical. That breakthrough moment when the patient can finally say, this is the pain, that's everything. He has translated the symptom into language, he's given the wound a name.
And that, right there, is the grand connection we've been building towards. What Jewish modernists like Zukofsky were doing with poetry is what a shaman does with ritual and what a therapist does with speech. They were taking the unformed, unarticulated pain of an invisible wound and giving it a formal structure, giving it language. And in doing so, they made it something tangible, something you can actually begin to navigate instead of just being drowned by it.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to sit with. If history itself can be an invisible wound carried by people across generations, then is it possible that art and poetry in particular isn't just a record of that wound, but maybe, just maybe, an essential part of its cure?